Hello, good evening. Ever since I grew this beard, I always have to tell people my eyes are up here. Stop looking at this magnificent growth. Hi, I'm Dr. Bear, and welcome to my live stream class. It's an introduction to heart rhythm meditation. So I'm here every week on Tuesdays, 7 o'clock Pacific, and I'm a professor of economics, a teacher of meditation. And I practiced heart rhythm meditation for many years. It's a method that comes out of Sufism. The Sufis have many different kinds of spiritual practice, many different kinds of meditation. So it's not the only Sufi practice. There's lots of them. Um, but I found this one to be very effective and a great introductory method, great for people who are just learning or also advanced practitioners. May be different from what you know already about meditation. Put a lot of attention on the breath. So we want to sit in a way that's upright so that we can be still. We want to have our backs straight, our posture very energetic, right? Um, and then we want to work on really tuning into the breath. So pretty much every method of meditation has these elements, but we want to go further. Okay, we don't want to just be aware of what the breath is doing. We want to change it, right? We want to make our breath ideal, to make it optimal. So, well, what does this mean, right? Well, it means a couple of things. So the first is making your breath deep. Okay, so that is that your abdominal region is activated. So this is diaphragmatic breathing. And this is very important because it activates the part of your nervous system, which is called the parasympathetic nervous system. This is the part of your nervous system that is sometimes called the relaxation response. That it's associated with all of these physiological effects, slowing heart rate, lowered blood pressure, the production of anti-stress hormones and the deproduction of the stress-related hormones, um, and so on. Right, the activation of the vagus nerve is part of what triggers this very important part of the nervous system. Okay, so the opposite of that is the sympathetic nervous system. That's the fight or flight response, right? That the physiological effects are opposite there. uh, Rising heart rate, more muscle tension, higher blood pressure, and so forth, right? Um, so that's sort of our problem. The problem of modern life is we get stuck in that, right? Our fight or flight response, our sympathetic nervous system, is kind of always on. Maybe it's not fully on. Maybe it's not adrenaline cranked to the max, but it's it's stuck on at some level. So one of the things that meditation can do is to just consciously relax, right? And that can be very powerful because you're using your mind, right? You're using your intention to relax. Um, Something that sometimes it's difficult to do, right? Okay, so that's one element, making your breath deep. Another element of it is making your breath slow, right? We normally breathe at a rate maybe somewhere between 15 and 20 breaths a minute. Okay. And that gives us a certain rhythm. Okay. Because the rhythm of your breath is a very fundamental rhythm of your body, your mind, even your emotions, even your spirit is affected by this fundamental rhythm, right? Because breath is a very basic exchange that we make with life, right? So every breath that we take in, we are taking air and other particles, right? And on a spiritual level, we're taking in spirit, we're taking in energy, right? um, as we breathe out, we are expressing energy, right? We are expressing what has been inside our body, right? The breath that has been inside our body. And then that goes out into the world, not only the air part, but the energy part, right? Which goes a lot further, right? Energy is not bound by the same limitations that matter is, right? So, all right. So, we want to slow down this rhythm, both because it also slows down our thoughts and our feelings and right all that. Um, Also activating the parasympathetic nervous system, helping us to relax, decreasing things like anxiety, decreasing the heart rate, and so on. Um, but also because a slower rhythm is more powerful. It gives us time by slowing down to turn within, to understand ourselves, to appreciate our inner life in a way that, well, that we rarely do, right? Um, and so this is one of the things that meditation should do, right? It's about self knowledge, connecting you to yourself on the deepest level. All right. Now, we also want to make our breath rhythmic. So that means the same length on the inhalation as it is on the exhalation. And along with that, we don't want there to be any pauses or interruptions. So part of rhythmic means it's going smoothly, right? Back and forth, right? At a good rhythm. There's no jigs and jags in there. It's um, now there are times where we might want to hold the breath consciously, but one of the basic parts of the practice is just to make sure that our breath is flowing. Okay. Now we want that flow to be even in both directions. Okay. So, like a swing that swings out and then swings back, right, in a regular pattern. Okay. So, rhythmic breathing, again, it's very powerful because rhythm is a lot of the key to life, right? I mean, if you do the right thing but at slightly the wrong time, your rhythm's just a little bit off, everything goes haywire. Right? You don't have the right rhythm when you're walking or running, or I mean almost anything that you do, right? It's going to go wrong. So we want to create that rhythm on a very fundamental level. uh, and it turns out it's quite healthy for your body to have this kind of rhythm. Okay, so we can see this in um, a pattern called heart rate variability. Heart rate variability refers to the speeding up and slowing down that happens on a micro level of your heart rate. Okay, so if your heart rate has a kind of average, like maybe your average for your heart rate is, let's say, 70 beats a minute or something like this. That's how many beats you're going to, on average, have in that minute. But what happens to your heart rate? Your heart rate does not stay constant, right? Like, if your heartbeat is beating about once a second, the interval between each beat is not always the same. Okay, that's so your heart is actually always speeding up and slowing down. And there's a name for this in medical literature. It's called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. Sounds like a scary condition, doesn't it? But it's actually good. Respiratory sinus arrhythmia, RSA, is associated with the healthiest people, right? That is children, athletes, right? People who are in good physical condition, in good health, they have RSA. Again, meaning the heart speeds up and slows down, and it does this in a regular pattern, right? And it turns out that that pattern is very much correlated with your breath. All right. So if you breathe rhythmically, breathe deeply, breathe slowly, all these things that I'm describing, right? What happens to your heart rate? Well, your heart rate speeds up and slows down in a regular pattern with your breath. Okay. Very, very important. And this produces good heart rate variability. Okay. Why do we want this? Well, if you don't have good heart rate variability, okay, so imagine your heart wasn't speeding up or slowing down, it was just a kind of flat line. Um, well, this, it turns out, is very much a negative for your health. Flat heart rate variability, or what's called low, it's never really totally flat, but low heart rate variability is associated with all kinds of negative heart outcomes. So we want to avoid that, right? We want to have, a healthy RSA, right? Healthy heart rate variability, um, and, not flat. Okay, so rhythmic, deep, slow, all these things. This is a reliable way of producing a good, healthy pattern of heart rate variability. Uh, so that's good, right? I mean, do you have to be trying to make this happen? No, you don't have to have yourself hooked up to a monitor or whatever, right? You do the breathing, learn how to do it. It's going to produce this pattern. Uh, all right, so we also want to make the breath heart centered. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, we want to focus our breath, focus our attention on our heart chakra. All right, so chakras system that's it's often used in yoga and things. Many spiritual traditions have it. Sufism has this chakra system as well. Um, the heart chakra is the center of your emotion, your ego, your selfhood. Uh, it's the center of your spirit. It's the vessel which holds your spirit. That's how the Sufis construct it. So that's a pretty important thing to focus on, right? And we know physically, of course, the physical heart, which is right in same place as the as the chakra. Um, by the way, the heart is located in the center of your chest. It's not to one side. We check for it on one side, usually the right side, because the flow of blood in the heart comes to a kind of point and reverses itself, and that makes the beating of it a little bit easier to detect on one side. Okay, but the actual organ is centered in your body. Uh, so, you might be better able to sense it on one side because of that phenomenon that I mentioned, the way that the blood flows in it. Uh, all right. So, how do we go about making our breath heart centered? Right. Well, first of all, we want to use our attention. Right. We are paying attention to the breath. We're modifying the breath. We're making the breath different than it usually is, right? So we want to, if we can, pay attention to that beating of our hearts. Okay. Um, Now I know this is a maybe kind of a tall order. Not everyone can sense their heartbeat without doing anything. Now we know from teaching this method to a lot of people, about half can. About half the people can feel their heartbeat, without doing anything in particular, and about half cannot, right? So, if you can feel it, great. And maybe the stuff I'm going to say at this point, I'm going to give some tips, right? Then that's not all that relevant to you. Okay. If you're having trouble feeling your heartbeat, there's a couple of things that you can do. So one of them is just to take, as you're sitting, just take your fingertips and press them lightly against your breastbone there. All right. Or just maintain just a little bit of pressure. It doesn't take very much for you to start feeling that pulse in your fingertips. Okay. You might have to just keep that pressure steady, right? You don't want to be going harder and less hard or whatever, right? Just keep that steady little bit of pressure. It doesn't take that much, right? And you might start feeling it in your fingertips. Okay. So there is a difference between feeling the heartbeat itself versus the echo of the heartbeat, which is the pulse. But whatever you're feeling, right, is okay. Because again, at this point, we're just interested in, do you have that signal, right? So, and maybe you only pick up a few beats. Maybe you only get one, right? Maybe you get two, right? That's enough. That gives you enough to be like, okay, here's the rhythm, right? And then you just fill that in with your mind, okay? Now, sometimes people start off not being able to feel it, and maybe they don't do this. Maybe they just say, all right, I'm just going to count in my mind. I'm not feeling my heartbeat, but I'm just going to imagine it, right? That's okay too, right? You can't feel it, you can imagine it. All right. So different things. Some people find it works better to put the palm on the chest rather than the fingertips. Okay, so try out either one of those things, right? Put the palm on there, put your fingertips on there. Now, there's another little trick that I'll tell you guys. So and this one is you can put the palm on and have your other hand just kind of wrap around, right? So you're doing this, to get you get your fingertips on your wrist, right? Feel your pulse, okay? And now you're doubling up, right? You've got the you got this one's got the hand on the chest, and then I've got the other one looped around, and this is a point where the skin is sort of thin, right? You have the you have a good possibility of feeling your pulse there. All right, so that's another method. All right, well, and the last thing we want to do with the breath is to make the breath bigger and more powerful than it typically is. So we call this the full breath. And you do that by squeezing the breath out on your exhalation and then allowing your belly to expand and then bring the breath up into your chest. Okay, so this might sound different from what I was saying before because I was really emphasizing the diaphragmatic breathing. We don't want to lose that, but when we extend the breath and we make it bigger, the only way to really do that is to also include your chest. Okay, so what's called thoracic breathing. So we want to start by expanding the belly and then keep that going, bring it all the way up. Okay, we don't want to skip. We don't want to skip the belly. We want that expansion. We want a lot of expansion to be happening there. All right, so now that I've described this at some length, let's try it out. Okay, so take a upright posture and arrange yourself so that your back can be straight. You're sitting directly over your sits bones, and your spine is upright. Check on the position of your head. Make sure that your head is not too far forward or too far back. You don't want to be looking down or looking up, right? You want your head to be pretty level, all right? Um, so, and then you close your eyes, tune into your breath. Let me just place your hand on your belly and just feel your belly expanding as you breathe in and contracting as you breathe out. Just to make sure, just to double check that you're doing abdominal breathing. Now, on your next exhalation, squeeze your abdominal muscles and try to breathe out more than you're used to. And on your inhalation, allow your belly to expand and then your rib cage and all the way up to your collarbones. Feel that expansion happening as you bring in the breath, making your breath full. Now, this might be more challenging. We're breathing quite differently now than we normally do. The only way it's going to work for you to take a bigger breath and for it not to make you lightheaded is if your breath also becomes, at the same time, slower. All right. Taking a bigger breath means that you're going to be changing the chemical balance of your blood. And this is good. But again, you need to have a slower breath rate for this to work. Okay, so all of these elements go hand in hand. Making your breath deep, making it full, making it slow. All right, it's part of controlling your breath. Last class, I talked about meditation and how it can help you with self mastery, self control. So, controlling the breath is a very fundamental way of gaining self control. So now you tune into your heartbeat. Maybe if you're not feeling the heartbeat, then try out my different tricks here. I'm doing the one that I mentioned. I've got the fingertips on the wrist here, and I've got the other palm on the chest, giving myself a number of different opportunities here to feel my heartbeat. I'm noticing in this posture that my finger that's wrapped around here, it's got some weight on it from my other arm, and that's giving me a very good like my middle finger is it's got some weight on it, and like whenever your finger has a little bit of weight on it, you start to feel that pulsing. So um, this is this is working pretty well for me. I'm feeling it more in my finger because of the pressure on it than I am in my wrist. No, I feel it in the wrist too. A lot going on there. All right, so okay, so that gives you a little bit of an introduction. I didn't do the last part, which is to use your heartbeat to make it rhythmic. And we'll come back and we'll practice again in a bit. Um, uh, but I wanted to talk a little bit um, about meditation is about the experience of the infinite. So this naturally brings up, well, what is that? Right? What is the infinite? Um, the unlimited, the perfect, the divine. It brings up our concept of God. And what is that? What is that concept? So now you might be saying, why is this important? You know, why why are my religious beliefs or whatever, where's God? Does God have to be involved? Um, and the answer is, well, it doesn't. We can we're not expecting you to have any particular beliefs here, right? We're trying to make this be about your experience, not some doctrine, right? Not something that you've read, or here's what this person thinks or whatever. Not that, right? Because that's not real. I mean, it's real if you make it real, right? Those ideas, teachings, etc. Um, when they're on a page, they're dead, right? But when they come alive in you, that's something, right? What makes that happen? Meditation is about experience. It's again, like, it's as hard to describe what happens as it is to explain what love is to somebody who's never experienced that, right? Um, I mean, I could talk all day about it, and would you understand it if you had never felt it? Maybe not. But you might catch some of it. So it's like, we don't want to say that talking has no value. Maybe it's inspiring, or maybe you find it beautiful. So, but we always want to be cultivating the experience, right? Um, Now, here's the other aspect of this. Here's the other reason why meditative traditions, spiritual traditions always do some talking and always do some philosophizing, which is mind blowing stuff happens when you meditate, right? Does it happen every single time? No, not necessarily. Because you can't expect that to happen, especially when you're getting started, right? You've got to do the basics. Um, Sometimes it does happen right away. I mean, it's unpredictable, right? Everyone's different. Everyone's readiness for these kinds of experiences is different. So we want some kind of way of understanding what has happened, right? Because things can and do happen in meditation that are just like, right? Your preconceived ideas just get kind of blown out of the water, right? That happens. Um, so, and then you kind of struggle afterwards, right? Like, what happened? How do I understand that? How do I make sense of that, right? Um, so, having some kind of philosophical understanding for that is can be quite helpful, right? Okay, so I'll talk about God then, right? um, One of our obstacles when we do this is that we have a certain cultural understanding, like in Western civilization, right? Whatever that means, we have a certain conception of God, right? God is very personal. God is, it like in the Bible, right? God has emotions. God gets angry, right? God is like a, white guy who lives up in the sky and, he's got a big white beard. Maybe looks a little bit like me. I don't know. I don't want to be too full of myself, right? But there's a certain cultural image. It's like that famous painting on the everyone's seen this, right, on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, God and Adam. So that can be a real obstacle, right? Because a lot of people have been abused in one way or another. That by the church, by this Western kind of concept of a personal God. So, we don't want that concept to be limiting to us, right? We want, and here's one of the things that's damaging about it, okay? What holds us back, right? Because, on the one hand, it's helpful to try to have a kind of personal relationship, right? But on the other hand, there's certain philosophical problems that emerge, right? Like okay, so we think of God in a way of being like God is always good, right? Well, then how do we make sense of the tragedies, the abuses, the horrible things that happen, the bad things, right? Well, the way that we've done this in Western culture is we've created another figure, the devil, right? And that's who's all evil, okay? And so then God and the devil, and they're always clashing. Well, I mean, this is duality, right? This is not unity. You have two sides clashing. There's always the question, which one's more powerful? Um, and it's difficult because the devil often comes across as being a very interesting and compelling character, right? The devil does things that are a lot more relatable, that seem more fun, right? Than God does. If we just look at the two as characters, right? I hope I'm not being offensive here. Um, so, right, how do we take seriously, right, the concept that comes out of meditation, that's in every spiritual tradition, is that God is one, God is unity, God is all. So, well, okay, what does that mean, right? God is all. What about good and evil? What about the clash, God versus devil, right? Where's that fit in? Um, I mean, because if God is all, then God is the devil too, right? I mean, God is humanity as well as that which is beyond humanity. So how do we like make sense of this? If God is all, then is God behind the bad things that happen to us, the things that we struggle to accept? Um, okay, this is a challenge, right? Um, and if this isn't a challenge for you, then great. You know, maybe nothing really that bad has ever happened to you that's made you ask the question, right? How could God permit this, right? When we suffer, that's often a question that comes up. If not, then great, you've got very strong faith, right? Or maybe you don't believe in God at all. That's okay too. So again, I want to demand that you believe anything here, right? But it's just these are all influences on us. Whether we believe or not hardly matters. We're all affected by these cultural archetypes, okay, and that has an impact on what we think about, how we feel, right? So along with this dualistic kind of concept of God is the idea that if we behave ourselves, if we follow the rules, if we ourselves are good, then we will, get good things in return and we'll never experience anything bad, right? Now, I think we all know that's not really true, right? Um, because life, I mean, stuff happens, um, and it happens to, uh, the rain falls on the just and the unjust, as they say, right? Um, so, but nonetheless, right? I felt this myself, right? I'm trying so hard to be on the right path, and then I'm sure that horrible things will not happen. Well, sometimes they still do. You know, how do we deal with that, right? What's our cosmology here? What's our understanding of the way that things work, right? The way that the universe works. Um, so I'm going to suggest that we take a certain attitude towards it. Okay, again, am I insisting that you believe this? Not at all, right? Try it on. It's like trying on a pair of shoes, right? Just to try it on. If you find you like the fit, then keep it. If not, maybe you modify it, or maybe you take it off and discard it. That's okay, right? I mean, most of what I've tried to do here is, techniques, right? Things that you can feel whether they work, right? Um, so maybe the stuff I'm saying here is relevant. Maybe it's helpful. Maybe not. I don't know. Okay. What if we took this point of view, right? What if we took the point of view that God is all, God is one being which appears in many, many different forms, right? And is also that which is behind all those forms, that which is, so God is present in all of existence and also in non existence. What if we take that perspective, right? And then why does God go into manifestation, right? What is happening here? So to as part of the quest for self-development, self-knowledge, right? Growth, progression, development, all of this. Uh, that seems to be a driving force of life. Okay. What if we took this within ourselves, right, and said the things that happen to us, I mean, look, some of them we're going to regard as good, some of them are going to feel pleasurable at the time, right? Maybe they feel painful at the time. What if the driving force behind this, right, God, the universe, whatever we want to call it, the infinite, is helping us to grow, right? What if we took that point of view and said, even the worst things that happen, there is some purpose to them, there is some point to them. Maybe we can't understand it, right? Except in a kind of most overview type of way, right? Does it mean that we're not going to struggle with it? No, we're still going to struggle with it, of course. Having a philosophy doesn't mean you don't struggle, right? um, but it might help you with it, right? Okay, because remember what we want to cultivate here is the experience of unity, the experience of the infinite. Um, we do that first by concentrating our mind, right? Then we try to open ourselves to the next stage of this, which is contemplation, get in the flow, Concentration is hard, but being in the flow is easy. Okay. So, again, this is the point of really learning how to breathe right. Okay. First of all, it helps your concentration. Secondly, it helps you get into the flow. All right. But we don't want to just be, I mean, being in the flow is great, right? But we we want to go beyond that, right? We want to experience the infinite, the perfect, the eternal. Okay. Um, why? Why do we want that? I don't know, right? That seems to be human nature, right? We always want to go further. We always want to experience more, right? We don't like stagnating. We don't like stopping in our development. We don't like being stopped. We don't like being limited. So why? Well, I think, I feel, right, that is that divine coming through us, right? That God wants to experience God self. We don't have the right pronouns here, right? In English. God wants to experience God's self in all of these different ways in the ultimate development of each form. Okay. Um, I mean, I certainly feel this in myself, right? I feel very strongly, right, the drive to develop myself in the ways that I'd like, right? Okay, so can we connect that personal feeling, that personal urge to the divine, to the urge of the universe, to the desire of the universe, right? Okay, so let's try again. Let's practice this a little bit, and we'll see, if we can bring some of these concepts to life. All right. So we'll take that upright posture once again. Tune into your breath. Make your breath slow and deep and rhythmic, heart centered. And place a hand on your heart. It might help you to feel your heartbeat. And now you bring your heartbeat in tune with your breath. So the same number of beats in as beats out. And if you can't feel your heartbeat, then you try one of the things that I mentioned before. Try pressing with your fingertips, or hold the wrist of your other hand like this, and try this. Now work on really extending your breath so that as you exhale, you're squeezing your abdominal muscles harder, much harder than you normally do as you breathe. Really draw your belly in until it feels like it's really resting against your spine. You just really expelled all of that breath. And breathe in, allow your belly to expand, expand your rib cage all the way up to your collarbones. Big inhalation. Maybe hold the breath for a little while at the very top of your inhalation. And then you release and exhale, keeping the rhythm of your breath. Same number of beats on the inhalation as the exhalation. You want to hold your breath again at the top of the inhalation. Very important to do this only when your lungs are full of breath. And you can. This is another way of feeling the heartbeat, holding the breath. Your body is in motion. Because there's muscular activity that's involved with breathing, right? So there's movement that's happening in your torso. So when you hold your breath, you can be still in a different way, and this can often make the heartbeat more, perceivable. The other great benefits of making your breath slower is that your breath cycle is longer. You have more time to appreciate each breath, to see deeper into and to feel more deeply the quality of the breath. You might notice that there's a different feeling or a different energy that's present at the very beginning of your inhalation than there is at the very end of your inhalation, and the same for your exhalation. So begin to notice that beginning, middle, and end of each breath. What is that like? What does that feel like? I want you to get a sense that your energy is greater than it was before, and that it's also controlled. By controlling your breath, you're controlling your energy. Very good skill to develop, the skill of controlling, holding energy. Now you might try this visualization as you do your breathing, you feel your heartbeat. Imagine as you breathe out that your heart is expanding energetically. Energy of your heart is spreading in all directions. And this is true on a physical level. The human body has an electromagnetic field. Electromagnetic fields extend to infinity. The energy of them gets much, much less as you as the further you go, but the field does extend to the whole universe. So there is some truth as far as we can measure it, right? That of what the mystics have always said. Feel your breath extending to infinity. And that is all you, right? By extending outwards, we're not going outside of ourselves. We're feeling ourselves expand. We are identifying ourselves with the energy of our hearts that is spreading outward as we breathe out. And as you breathe in on the inhalation, you might try this visualization to feel that you are receiving and from an infinite stream of energy pours into your heart from all around. Ah, there it is. Hmm. If you're not feeling anything particularly extraordinary, that's okay. The meditation is like life sometimes, sometimes not much happens. That's okay. You're still getting benefit, right? By doing your breathing, slowing your rhythm down, creating a healthy pattern for your heart, developing self-control by controlling your breath, learning how to sit still, concentrating your mind. All of these things have immense value. So if you're not feeling the infinite nature of life, the universe, and everything, that's okay, right? Whatever happens, whatever you receive, and just say, all right, I'm going to take this with gratitude. That is what I need right now. It's a gift from me to me. All right, we'll end our practice session right there. The Sufis use a certain metaphor to understand the relationship between the human being and God, right? And Sufis also use a very interesting word for God. That's the Islamic word for God, Allah. That's a very fascinating word, right? Because the word means the all, right? Very, and it's with a very open sound, right? Allah, sound, right? A very wonderful type of sound, And in Arabic language, there's not a lot of hardness to this, right? It's a very open, like Allah. It's a very open kind of sound, right? It doesn't have hard edges to it. Okay, so that's interesting. But what about the what about the relationship between the human being and God, right? Again, our culture, Western culture, broadly speaking, creates a real division between these things, right? It says there's the divine, and then there's human beings, and they're different, right? So, Hazrat Inayat Khan, who's the Sufi master that I trace my lineage to, had an interesting way of saying this, right? It's like our image that the culture gives us is like, God is the crafts person, right? And human beings are like the wooden toy made by the crafts person, like that, right? So Hazrat Nikon saying, well, okay, that suggests that there's a different substance, right? Like, the human being is made of wood in that metaphor, right? God is the human, right? Made of flesh. So we have to. That's a good start, right? But we have to kind of stretch our metaphor a little bit, right? Because the the Sufis' perspective is the substance of God and the substance of a human being is the same, right? That's just there's not they're not made out of different things. They're made of the same exact thing, right? That comes out of the philosophy of unity, right? So the way that this is depicted is to say Think of a piece of rope, right? Piece of rope. Okay. I mean, I wish I had one, right? I don't have one at the moment, but piece of rope. Um, and imagine, okay, so okay, that's what it is, right? Imagine you tie a knot in it, right? Okay, so the knot represents clearly it's different from the rest of the rope, right? You can say, okay, here's where the knot is, right? And the rest of it doesn't have that, But what is the knot made out of, right? I mean, is it made out of something different than the rest of the rope? No, it's the same thing, obviously, right? It's just put into a certain shape. It's put into a certain configuration, right? That is a better metaphor, perhaps, to say, okay, the relationship between a human being and God. They are not different substances, right? So one of my teachers, Purvalayat, an icon, um, talked about this and said, it's like a hologram. A hologram contains each part of it contains the entire image. So, right, we're individual parts. We're like cells in this great body, but each one of us contains the whole, right? So, kind of like in the DNA of the cell, you have this right whole blueprint for the entire organism. So, these are metaphors, hopefully that help to kind of understand. Here's another one that's famous metaphor in Sufism that it's like the ocean, right? That vastness. That's what God is, right? And what is the human being? Like a bubble. Okay, so is there something different there? No, right? But clearly there is something, like it's not made of something different, right? I mean, a bubble is just a little pocket of air in the water, right? Um, so we can see it, we can perceive it, right? It's got a form, it has dynamics to it, um, but it is not something different, right? It's always there in the midst of the whole. Okay, so you know, again, the point of this philosophy is to help you to widen your experience, right? We meditation on a very deep level, right? It's about the experience of the infinite. So we want to be cultivating that. We want to, and we want to cultivate it in this attitude that says we can't make this happen. We cannot. This is where grace comes in. We cannot make ourselves experience the unlimited. We can be open to it. We can ask for it to happen. We can, and it's like anything. The more you ask, the more likely it is to happen. So you know, practice meditation regularly. Go into it with that intent. Right, whatever happens is okay. Um, but this is what I'm hoping for. This is what I'm longing for. Right. So one of the things that we look for in meditation is what is the peak experience. What is what you think of as uh, you know a very significant one, something that you remember, something that you think of as like, wow, something happened, right? So what is that peak experience, and when was the last time you had it? Right. Because again, we are trying to cultivate this. What we want, we would want, what we'd like is for it to become a regular occurrence, right? Even though we cannot make that happen, still we can get good at, we can get good at preparing the ground so that it happens on a pretty reliable basis. Okay, but to it's like I don't know, farming or something. You got to do a lot of digging and preparing of the ground. That can be hard work before you harvest, and before the everything everything manifests. All right. All right, let's one more session of meditation here. Take a few minutes. Feel that upright posture. Tune into your breath. Place your breath in rhythm with your heart. You might repeat a sacred word or phrase. For me, it's the word Allah. I grew up with Sufism, so it has a deep emotional resonance to me. You choose a different word. It's not, again, this is not a theology class. It's not religion. You choose a word that has some resonance for you, some meaning for you. So rather than counting out one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, or whatever, right? Instead, you can repeat that word, right? So for me, it sounds like Allah, 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 right? You get the idea. So I do two groups of four. I don't need to count, right? The four-part rhythm is already kind of ingrained in us, right? You just go ba, 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 right? Do I need to know that that's four? I already know, right? Uh, Maybe if I was doing 47, then I need to count it out. But if it's four, I got that. Two groups of four, or a lot of times I like to use the 12 beat rhythm. So three groups of four, just like learning an instrument, right? As you breathe, you are opening yourself to experience the infinite. All right, it looks like we're just about out of time. So I hope that worked for you. I was feeling the vibe. I hope you were as well. If you have a question, please send me a message on Twitter or on Facebook. Um, Thank you so much for joining me. We're here every Tuesday, 7 o'clock. If you'd like to support my work, teaching meditation, you can visit my Patreon page. Thanks so much for your support, and have a good night.